Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Last night, at least 22 innocent people were murdered by a suicide bomber in Manchester, England. Today, President Trump commented on the attack during a joint press conference with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas.
So many young, beautiful, innocent people living and enjoying their lives murdered by evil losers in life. I will call them from now on losers, because that's what they are. They're losers.
Well, you've seen this before and you know what's going to happen next. Unfortunately, our leaders are going to tell us that acts of terror are just something that happens, like the weather. Just accept it and move on. There is nothing you can do, or better yet, just pretend it's not happening all around you. As Katie Kay to BBC put it this morning, Europe is, quote, getting used to attacks like this because they have to, because they're never going to be able to totally wipe this out. You hear that a lot, but consider it for a minute. Why is violent terrorism an inevitability in Europe now? Unless you grew up in Northern Ireland or Italy or the Basque Country, terrorism was not a significant hazard a generation or two ago. Ask someone who was alive then. This is new. Something has changed. What is it? Well, the answer, as most people understand, but relatively few admit, is that demographics change. There are a lot of Muslims living in Europe now. Most of them are indeed decent people, as we're often assured, but a surprisingly large number of them aren't. Check the numbers. In 2006, after just a year after terrorists murdered more than 50 people in London on the subway bombings, a full 20% of British Muslims said they sympathized with the motives of the bombers. Younger Muslims were even more enthusiastic about what had happened, about the killings. In 2007, Pew found that at least 20% of young Muslims here in America, in France, Germany, and Britain and Spain, believe that suicide bombings could be justified. In France, that number was above 40%. Last year, 29% of French Muslims said they viewed Sharia as a higher law than the civil laws of France. Of course, we shouldn't be surprised that radical views are common among Western Muslims because they're even more common in their home nations. In 2014, 47% of Bangladeshi Muslims said suicide bombings to defend Islam were acceptable, almost half. A quarter of Egyptians said the same thing. A fifth of Turks and Malaysians agreed. In 2009, 78% of Pakistani Muslims told Pew that people who leave Islam should be killed, murder for apostasy. In Egypt, support for that was 86%, Afghanistan 79%, Bangladesh 44%, Iraq 42%. Well, these are not little places, obscure theocracies in remote regions. They're some of the biggest countries in the Muslim world, and more to the point, they've sent millions of immigrants to the West. We could go on like this for the whole show. There's an awful lot of research on this subject, and all the numbers tell the same story. Why are they being ignored? Now, our leaders like to boast they believe in science, that they let data and hard evidence drive their policies. They are lying, and never more obviously than in this case. They don't want to see the numbers. They actively suppress them. If you really cared about America, you wouldn't want it to become Europe, dangerous, divided, unstable. You wouldn't import a massive Muslim minority into your country simply because it made you feel open-minded and virtuous, and then hope for the best. That's a faith-based approach, and it's nuts. We know exactly what will happen if we do that because we're watching it live on television from Manchester right now. If you really cared about the country you led, you'd figure out how to make sure that every person you imported, of any religion, enthusiastically shared your most cherished values: tolerance, pluralism, free speech, equality under the law, just for starters. You tell them not to litter, by the way, when they're here, too. We do the opposite. Our leaders worship multiculturalism, so we encourage immigrants to reject our culture in favor of their own because all cultures are equal, except that they're not all equal, as we were reminded last night with the murder of children in an arena in Manchester. Defend what you believe or you will lose it. That's the message of Manchester, just as it is also the basic lesson of all of history. But what if you don't believe in anything at all? Our leaders don't. Maybe that's why they can't defend us.